Um, so I am going to call to order the Curriculum Instruction Accountability and Assessment Subcommittee meeting at 3:30 on January 6th. I do know that one of our attendees, actually both of our attendees asked to be able to record the meeting. Stephanie, I don't know if you both want to do that. Cheryl had also asked, so I'm informing everyone that the public is recording this meeting.
I don't see Cheryl. Do you mind if I just go ahead and record?
Okay. We are holding this meeting remotely, which means any votes will be called by roll call. Mr. Carden could not be here today. We are going to start with an update on the Math Pathways Task Force. Those of you that are here presenting, if you can just introduce yourselves as you get started for our attendees.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll share and go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Excuse me. Good afternoon. I am Dr. Mona Ford Walker, Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, and also one of the leaders of the Math Pathways Planning Task Force.
And I'm Octavia Bronner, Director of Math and Computer Science, another leader of the Planning Pathways Task Force.
I'm Sam Hoyo. I'm the Science Director for the district, and I am a helper for my friends here.
You're also leading.
The task force.
Dr. Hoyo was somewhat of a late addition to the Math Pathways and Planning Task Force leadership team, but has always been a part of the work of the team. The science and math departments work pretty close together, and also based on some of what will most likely be future decisions related to Math Pathways, they connect deeply to science as well. And so Dr. Hoyo volunteered to support the team, and we graciously accepted Dr. Hoyo's leadership. So officially welcome, Dr.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here this afternoon, so short notice. So we are going to share an update of the Math Pathways Planning Task Force to date.
Where do you want me to be?
Agenda.
Actually, you can go to the agenda slide. Thank you. So I'm happy that we're here in January, the beginning of the year, to share what the work has been thus far. And I'd like to just preface this by saying the team has met for three times this year thus far, this school year. And so our work really feels like it's just launching and getting off the ground right now. And so some of the recommendations that you're going to be hearing this afternoon are preliminary recommendations that are attached to budget asks, not necessarily recommendations as it relates to a pathway for math. And so we have ideas around how to get to that ending target, but we're not there yet at this date on January 6th, 2026. So I just want to preface that and make sure that everyone understands why, and we can kind of revisit some of that as we move forward. But the goal for this particular meeting is to share just a really brief update on what the work has been thus far. Share a little bit about just a reminder of what the team's charges, the commitments, share, as I mentioned before, some of the preliminary recommendations and the budget asks that are connected to those preliminary recommendations, and the next steps for the task force. As a reminder, these are our task force members. We have about 6 staff members, 6 or 7, and then we also have about 6 or 7 community members as well. And so it's a pretty balanced team. Oh my goodness. How did I just had the thought? Wow.
I was like, suppress it.
Wow, that was not intentional. But yeah, so that's the team right there. And as I mentioned before, the team has met 3 times so far this year. We meet monthly, and we have a balance of in-person meetings and hybrid meetings, or excuse me, Zoom meetings. So just as a reminder, our charge is to develop recommendations for the next steps APS needs to take in order to ensure pathways through math coursework. And then these are the 3 areas that we are working towards ensuring the pathways reflects, and that includes providing students with opportunities to access courses that align with their learning goals, math coursework that aligns with existing APS commitments to MTSS, challenge by choice for students, and building foundational knowledge and core content. And then finally, pathways through math coursework that will be sustainable and efficient enough for the system to support financially, contractually, and structurally. So as I move into kind of what the work has been for the team, I just want to highlight these three areas because we really are taking an approach where we are looking at these as three different buckets in order to make sure that we're meeting the charge. And so our work is kind of sectioned off into smaller subgroups as of our last team meeting. And that has really been an opportunity for folks to take this big charge and think about what area of it they're most interested in doing a little bit more research in and doing a little bit more thinking around. And so, again, as I mentioned before, because we've only met 3 times so far this year, we haven't developed final recommendations yet in these areas, but we are working towards that, and we'll definitely meet the goal of that by spring.
So in addition to the 3 meetings we've had, sounds like subgroups are also meeting. And I got a very excited email from one of the subgroup
Oh, great.
people yesterday who enjoyed her
Yeah.
time with her subcommittee.
Great. Yeah. So at our last meeting, that's when we kind of decided
Broke
to,
off.
do the split approach, and we asked teams to meet before we meet again
Okay.
next week.
And
So
then my other,
different teams have taken that on in different ways.
and they're sort of setting their own schedules.
Yeah.
So then my other question is, on these 3 teams, is there cross representation across the different roles that you had in the
Yeah.
full committee?
So great question. Actually, it's more than 3 teams. I think we have a total of 5, maybe subgroups. And again, because we're a team of 12, those teams really are 2 to 3 people
Mm.
each. And so, for the most part, there is a split, meaning that there's an APS staff member that is spread out across all of those teams, so that a community member can be paired up with a staff member, to help with some of the tasks that they're working on in terms of having an APS specific lens.
Okay.
So, but that work is just beginning. I just want to keep naming that.
Mhm.
This is a process that we don't want to rush, although we know that we're working side by side with other processes that we don't necessarily have a say so in terms of timing, like budget.
Mhm.
And so the work of the team has been, I would say, thoughtful, intentional, but also slow, because it's third meeting, I would say. Slower than I would say, how do I? It hasn't been too slow, but what I am saying is that when you have a new group of people who are working together to have a common understanding and then also solve a really huge challenging task, that there are steps that we must follow in order to do that, which include making sure everyone is on the same page with their understanding of what the task is, their understanding of what the charge is, et cetera. So we've taken time to do that. And I think now we're at this point where the work is really picking up and starting to move forward. Why don't we keep?
Okay.
So what has the work included so far across these 3 months? So again, as I mentioned, we've worked on just clarifying the charge, making sure that everyone is understanding what we're actually charged to do. We have done some work around learning what the current pathways are in math, also in APS, also learning what the research says about tracking advanced math enrollment, et cetera. And we've done that through some readings. And also we have a pretty, I would say, robust Google Drive where we have different resources that we've asked team members to review and to think about. And some of those readings that are there on the drive are things that we've kind of been referencing in our work to date, and also things that we'll continue to reference as we move forward into making recommendations. Also, we've been working on evaluating the preliminary district cohort data, MCAS data from last year, and just some historical MCAS data. We've also been working on reviewing current pathway options in other districts and states, and we have one of our subgroups where they're focused on looking at what local districts are doing in terms of pathway work, but then also what's happening across the country in California and other states as well, just so that we can make sure that we're using best practices as we're thinking about creating or working towards creating the pathway that we recommend for APS. And then finally, and Dr. Hoyle's on this subgroup, which has been great. We're working on creating a survey for families, students, and staff so that we can learn a little bit more about their APS math experience. I think it's been very eye-opening to hear what some of the experiences have been for some of our students and some of our families. And we also recognize that we haven't heard from a large number of families in terms of what their experiences have been, and also what their hopes are as it relates to math instruction for their students and just the math experience for their students. And so we're working on that currently right now so that that can be shared, I would say in winter time before spring, so that we can collect that data and use it in our final recommendations that we provide in the spring. And before I toss it to Octavia, I just want to kind of just remind folks of the 4 commitments that we have as a Math Pathways Planning Task Force. We are making sure that the recommendations that we do develop are that these 4 areas are reflected, and that's challenged by choice, informed agency for students, opportunities for strong foundational knowledge to be developed and expressed in these offerings, and then finally flexible interventions for students. There has been an ask, and I think that we are all on the same page in terms of making sure that we have offerings for students, since there will no longer be a math bypass program in 6th grade. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we move into some of the initial recommendations, but I just want to name that we want to make sure that all of our students are experiencing whatever the support that they need or the challenge that they need. And I will toss it to Octavia.
All right, so a lot of our preliminary recommendations for the work that we're doing this year connect to the slide with the bullet points where it outlines some of those different buckets that we're working in, the different teams of people within the task force. And so one team started by developing some initial questions that we could ask in a survey of families, students, and teachers to get more detailed feedback, more data, not just anecdotal necessarily, but like gather that data and see what trends are we seeing, what are students experiencing, what does it look like for families through their lens, what about teachers and maybe other staff, support staff, to inform what the math experience is like for Arlington students. And then also thinking about not just a one and done survey, but like, what is it we want to do moving forward? So as we do this work into the next year and do any modifications or changes in our programming, we want to make sure we have some way of getting continued feedback so that we can make informed decisions moving forward and make those adjustments as needed. So we're not in a space where we don't know what we don't know. And then providing an opportunity for everybody to have a voice. So there might be families or students that are not able to attend meetings such as this. There's still a platform which we can get a wider array and representation from the Arlington population, the community. Something else that we need is to think about what is out there in terms of literature and research. So we've started initially gathering some of that information and looking at what does the research say around tracking? What's been studied in other districts? What have other districts tried? And when they track those particular districts over time for 7, 8, 10 years, what are they finding? What does tracking and leveling look like? What are student outcomes as a way to just continue to inform what we're doing? And one thing we're trying to be mindful of as well is when we're looking at other districts, does that district look like Arlington? Because we know the outcomes in Arlington could be different. But it gives us a wider lens of what does tracking and leveling look like. With that, which I don't think we put on here, was looking at the tracking practices of neighboring districts or districts that look like Arlington. And so we have a team who's already started connecting with math leaders in other districts to say what happens for your students in 6th grade or 7th grade or 8th grade. getting more specific detail and asking them like, why did you make this decision or this decision? So we have the added value of, in some ways, their hindsight of, oh, if we had to do it over, we might have done this instead. So we can pull all of that information together and pair it sort of with the literature and make a better decision about what's the right move or moves or adjustments for Arlington. And then we don't want to dismiss like what we've already been doing. We want to look at what is it that's been happening already. We want to look at cohorts of students who have done the accelerated track versus not accelerated, and not just look at the outcomes after the end of, for instance, 7th grade, but what are the long-term outcomes? What does it look like for them their junior year when they're in pre-calculus, or their senior year, or even post-high school? Like, what decisions did they make? How did this influence, or did it not influence? And does it create two tracks where how hard does it determine those outcomes for students? Does it dictate future math learning and ability? So there's a lot of questions we want to answer that I think we can get some of those if we start looking at some of that cohort or focal group data. So we have a better understanding of the outcomes down the road. Like, what are the implications, not just in middle school, but later on in high school? And then lastly, we want to think about what is our pathway in K through 8, like really thinking about that as the foundation prior to getting to high school. Are we preparing students for the high school math that they need to be college and career ready? Are we setting the stage for them to start to figure out who they are and what they want to learn? And when they get to Arlington High, they have so many options available to them. Are they able to select things that align with what they want to learn, what they want to do, who they want to be when they leave here? So we want to make sure they have that foundation. And so it's important to review, what are we doing now? How are we doing it? And are there areas that we want to grow or modify? So part of that work is not just K through 8, but also thinking about our middle school structure. What are some structures that we have in place already, and thinking about how do we support students, how do we support staff? And so before we dig into the next couple slides, there's a couple vocabulary terms that I think we tend to toss around a little bit, that maybe there's not coherence around what they mean. So I wanted to add those to this slide. And these words are not exclusive to 6th through 8th grade, but we tend to use them a lot within the middle school conversation. Support, acceleration, and extension. So those 3 distinct words. Support would be some type of tier 2 instruction or tier 2 setting where we're supporting students to reach grade level. Tier 2, that setting could also be used for extension to help students move beyond grade level. And then acceleration is the pace at which they're moving through the pathways. So for instance, in 7th grade, we have an accelerated 7th grade course where they move through 7th and 8th grade math together in 1 year. So it's more content in that time frame. So they have to go through it more quickly to be prepared for Algebra 1. Acceleration at the high school might look like taking 2 math classes in a year. So they're moving through the pathway faster by doubling up. And then within those 3 sort of realms, support, acceleration, and extension, where's the flexibility for students to enter and exit or access those 3 elements at different points in the school year or at different points along the pathway? So thinking about when I have a conversation with a parent, what down the road, maybe the opportunity doesn't exist for your student right now, but what could it look like for them when they get to high school? Where are those opportunities when they're ready to access any of those other options that we have for acceleration? And so I just wanted to make sure we defined that. And then also, what data are we collecting to support that flexibility? We want to make sure we're grounded in that informed choice that Dr. Ford Walker referenced on a prior slide. What information are we collecting for students to support their decisions, support families helping them, support academic counselors when they meet with students? So this is not the slide I thought it was. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I can pick up if you want.
Oh, so we want to continue to think about sixth and seventh grade this year. What are some options for students when they're coming in who they have incomplete learning when they get to sixth or seventh grade, and those who are ready to move on. So what does math support look like in the middle school at sixth, seventh, and eighth grade? Where are there opportunities for acceleration? And at Gibbs, there's within their structure, and when they're looking at their schedule and the structures that are in place there, when is a possibility for an opportunity to offer areas of support and or acceleration? It won't necessarily be framed that way or called that. But just thinking about where are places where we can do this for students that are both in and outside the general ed classroom. Something else, when we're looking at our data for what we're doing in Arlington, and when we're thinking about what other districts are doing, and when we're thinking about what the research says around tracking, looking closely at, there's research on Algebra 1 for all in eighth grade. What does it say? What does it look like? Would this be something that Arlington wants to explore? And so I think I hesitated to put this on the slide because I think it's worth exploring and having conversations around, getting feedback from families and staff and students, and looking at what other districts do. In other words, when do they start tracking, if they track at all? And so that's another thing that the task force will be addressing in the spring, is to dig more into that idea. And if it's not Algebra 1 for all in eighth grade, where would we do that? Or do we want to stick with a more heterogeneous model, and for how long through middle school? I don't know who's controlling the slides. Thinking about next year, so those two slides for this year, we're really continuing the work that Dr. Ford Walker laid out with, like, what are the different buckets we're working in? What does the data say in Arlington? What does the research say for nationwide? What's been happening in other districts? What does our programming look like right now? How do we get feedback? So those kind of four, I'm missing one of the buckets, main areas. All of that work, thinking ahead to supporting what would it look like next year in terms of how will the work continue? And so something that's come up is, what about a curriculum review, which a lot of districts do before they start making this decision. And it would be saying, like, what is it we're currently doing? What does it look like? Where are areas we might want to change, and why? And so I have not myself been part of a curriculum review, but I know that we've just gone through a big one with the ELA curriculum in K-5. So thinking about using a lot of that experience that our current leaders have with that, and saying, what can we do with our math programming, and extending that up through eighth grade? Like, what does K through 8 really look like? What other curriculums are available? What does the state say? What's been the feedback? There's a lot of places where people review curriculum, and just using all of that information to support any decisions that we make. And when we think about curriculum, what extensions do they offer and interventions, so that we're getting as much as we can without putting a lot of additional load on the staff. Like, it's nice when you have extension material that you can then modify instead of creating it from scratch. In addition to a curriculum review, something that's come up in the task force and feedback from the members is looking at the scope and sequence and alignment in our courses in grades 6 through 12. How do we progress through courses, both with content, but I think also pacing and expectations on students? How are we helping students grow from 6th through 12th grade in terms of what we expect out of them?
I'm going to put you on the spot, but could you, the recent pre-calc alignment conversation,
Yes.
like a good example of that exercise and why it's important to do on a routine basis? Could you explain that just as an example of what you're talking about there? So like, when we looked at our pre-calc classes, because we were shifting, because the state recognizes it as an honors class, but then you discovered that there was content in there that actually belonged in some other courses maybe. And so there was some recalibration, and
Yes.
Just that quickly.
So for the last year, we talked about, right, so we talked about we talked about advanced math learning opportunities for our students. Like if a student enters the high school taking Algebra 1, for instance, the grade level course in ninth grade, and they take it at the college prep level, do they get an opportunity to do any type of advanced or honors coursework before they leave, if that's something that they would like to do? And pre-calculus was an opportunity to think about where that could happen for students. So the state defines pre-calculus as advanced coursework. Pre-calculus is in the framework, whereas calculus is not, because it's considered a college level course. So think about those students who come in at grade level still having an opportunity to access advanced coursework before they leave Arlington High. And if we're asking students to do advanced coursework, we wanted to honor that and provide an opportunity for them to get that honors credit, to say on their transcript, I took an honors level math course. It's considered advanced. We do weighted GPAs, so it can support that if that's something that they're looking for. One of the things we found this year was that we had an honors course that was designed for it was more advanced in the sense that it prepared students for BC calculus, which is 2 semesters of college calculus. And so we had 2 honors level pre-calculus courses, and there was, I think, naturally, confusion came out of what course students wanted to be in, where they felt they were best placed. There was a little confusion for staff about how to help support that decision. And so moving forward to clarify the 2 different pre-calculus courses and to model it after what we do in calculus, and to offer similar leveled courses that we do already in other departments for juniors and seniors. We're moving in the direction of keeping an honors pre-calculus course, which was the prior considered A-level course, and an AP pre-calculus course. So there's a clear distinction between the 2 courses, and there's a clear path for, if I need pre-calculus just to graduate for my senior year, I'm going to take that at the honors level. Whereas if I want to take it my junior year and or have an opportunity to take an AP math course my senior year, I have AP pre-calculus available to me. And we do that with calculus. Calculus is offered at the honors level and at the AP level. And then a lot of coursework for juniors and seniors, my understanding in other content areas is many of those courses are honors and AP. So it creates a similar experience across all the departments. Is that?
Yeah, and I think
like
is one really small example of how complicated this is, because if that's one little change because the state recognized one course as advanced coursework, and that one little change had so much conversation wrapped up in it for the pre-calculus teachers, a lot of consideration of what the core curriculum is going to be. Are we going to use the AP or not?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of consideration of what needs to go in the program of studies. And so doing a pathway review requires that kind of careful march, and there would be a lot of changes like that wrapped up into a rollout of this scale. And so I like it as an example because it's one small piece of what would be a much larger shift. So it's worth taking the time to.
Yeah, and any change that felt small initially, but ends up being
really big,
much bigger than we anticipate, and impacts students and staff and families and counselors. There's a much wider range of impact than just pick this class or this class. So yeah, so that's a good analogy on a smaller scale.
Sorry.
No, that's great. I love the questions. We talked about the review, the scope and sequence. Something else I think that aligns nicely with thinking about a scope and sequence and curriculum review is doing learning walks similar to the EL learning walks. And so getting teams of admin and staff, a variety of admin staff, to look at what does math instruction look like in the elementary schools. What are the trends that we're seeing? What questions do we have? Where are areas of strength? And what are areas we want to dig into and support modifications or growth? And I think on some level K-12, that would be great, because then we could get a fuller picture of we have these strength here in K5 and our strength in 6-8 happens to be here, and sort of thinking about how do we align that also. And then I want to keep assessing and collecting data and knowing that these are, when I say assessment, that feels like it's just a number of kids are just taking tests and getting data, but I think assessing how kids are doing in math in a variety of ways. And the more data we collect, the fuller picture we get about what our students are learning, what they're experiencing, and what they're prepared for. And so I want to continue a more thorough data review next year and thinking about what does that look like and planning for that, and knowing that that also takes time, sitting and gathering any data that we were looking at in the task force. Dr. Hoyo supported a lot of that. That takes time because it's not a clicking a couple windows to say, pull this data. You're pulling a lot of raw data and aggregating it.
And the
It's
department,
doable, but it just takes
and the
time.
department has started to do some of that work this year with the end of the unit assessments that you're starting to look at and collect at the elementary level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so K5 has been collecting a lot of assessment data already, regular data throughout the year, fluency screeners, the end of unit assessments, for K5, and thinking about what could that look like moving in 6-8, 6-12 also. Again, just as students move through, we get a portfolio of their learning. And we can see trends and we can see areas where like, wow, look at all this growth, or there wasn't as much growth here. What does that mean? What does that look like? What might be happening? Something that came up, a couple of the task force members talked about this parent and family university, which I really like this idea, and this naming it a university, I think really gives it that largeness that I think it would be. It's not as simple as holding one math night. It's a really much larger component to support students and families understanding what are the pathway options. When I choose something in middle school, what does that mean for my outcomes for my student in high school? Like not really understanding that in the moment, if this is their first child going through the school system, better understanding those options and the implications of them and the choices that still can happen later. What are these standards of mathematical practice I put on every presentation I do for families? Why are they foundational to deeper learning and understanding? Where did they come from? And sort of just giving more context. Knowing that I live in this space and I think I take for granted that I know these things and that I want to support families in knowing and understanding. And then they can ask more informed questions as well, to get those answers. Talking about like, why are we highlighting and emphasizing building numeracy over memorizing? What does fluency in math facts look like versus memorizing facts? Why are they different and why is it important for establishing fluency? Why do we want to lay foundation and explore and look at concrete and representations prior to learning an algorithm, right? And which is efficient, but how do we get there? We want students to understand that learning. So supporting families in doing that. And then also all of that is in service of supporting course selection and knowing where they want to go and what their learning goals are moving forward. And Rochelle and I are holding a Rising 7th grade family night coming up. And it's part informational, part presentation and questions, but part experience. So we're planning something for half of the hour for families to engage in some math learning that looks like what their children are learning in the classroom. And so not just giving it as information, but allowing it to be an experience as well.
Could I just add something to the importance of building numeracy over just memorizing facts? We can tell in science the students who have memorized facts and have algorithms because they're unable to take their math learning and apply it to science. If I gave them a question that was just what they've seen in math, they're able to do that. They're able to just plug and chug, plug and chug, plug and chug. But once we take the math and we have to apply it that's where students tend to struggle. And it's the students that have that algorithmic thinking that struggle the most. Students who have that numeracy and that fluency are able to do much better because they're able to make those transitions. Sorry.
No, that's great. That's helpful. I mean, I don't want math to live in isolation, right? Like it impacts what else students are learning and making connections cross-curricular, and the application piece. So, all right, so I think the next one. So this year, Rochelle and I worked on starting a math enrichment elective for 7th and 8th graders. It is a semester 2 this year, so that the first semester could be used by those teachers and our math coach to design and build that course out. And so it's for students who want to dig in more into math and are seeking that math enrichment. And we would like to continue that course next year. So the end of next year would be year 2, evaluating, do we want to keep that as part of our programming, or if we're making adjustments, does it somehow get absorbed in some other way? And so we also our 7th grade math support teacher and our 8th grade math support teacher are the teachers who are teaching that course. So our math support teachers do math support classes. They each teach a section of math. The 8th grade math support teacher teaches the geometry section, and 7th grade does the co-taught language-based math class, and then they also do the enrichment. So they're doing a lot in service of students across a wide array of students. So we would like to keep those in place for next year, including our math support teacher in 6th grade to support the whatever model we move towards for the 6th grade students.
Do you have any idea how many, off the top of your head, students are currently enrolled in those classes right now?
I think so. It meets 2 out of the 4-day cycles. So they have 2 half sections, and I think it's around 15 to 18 students in each of those half sections at both grade levels.
Okay.
Last I checked, I'm not sure.
So we're able to offer this to more kids than we're able to.
Correct. I think this year was the pilot, and the goal was to try to keep it somewhat smaller, one semester, so that there was time to design it and then reflect on it over the summer and make any modifications. I think right now the intention is to keep it on for next year and then make any changes as needed depending on what we're doing differently next year, 6th grade.
So will it be offered both semesters next year? Right?
Yeah.
It's
Correct.
it'll be the spring semester will be the first time, right?
Mhm.
And then, but it will be fall and spring.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Could kids take it twice? Like if they were in it and they wanted to stay in it or no?
Right now it's designed to just be
Yes,
one
semester
to the
class.
next. Yeah. I think how we offer it and what we do depends on how many students sign up for it when they're doing their course selection. Which is also going to be tough because until some students have gone through it and talked about it and there's more feedback on it, there might not be as much interest in it until that happens either. And then, as always, when we talk about modifying anything for students so they have access, we want to keep in mind that we want to support our teachers and our staff with the professional learning they need and want to be able to make the changes that we're asking them to make, or to be able to support the pathway programming that we're looking at. And so one thing is, if we talk about collecting data in this, like at 6th through 8th grade or 6th through 12th grade, what is the platform we're using? What is the data we want to look at? How do we look at data? And that requires a certain level of learning to do that in a meaningful way. Especially if we're using a platform, even with open architects, that might require doing a little more professional learning around that platform. Thinking about part of the strategic plan is we talk about the tiered instruction, continuing to work through as we have any kind of staff turnover, and as we continue to roll out, thinking about what is tier 1 instruction, what does it look like? What is heterogeneous instruction within that framing? And what is differentiation? And so a lot of that learning can keep happening as teachers as we move forward, and thinking about how does that support the math instruction we want to provide for students in 6th through 12th grade. And then other needs as identified. And so Dr. Ford Walker added a budget expense. This will be on the slide in 2 slides, I believe, or is it the next
Yeah.
slide? Oh, is the next slide?
That's the next one. So, again, I just want to highlight that these are preliminary expenses. These are estimates that we believe will support the movement of the work. So we mentioned the curriculum review team, and essentially we're estimating this at about $8,000, and that is really this is the K through 8 curriculum review. And we're thinking about this in terms of teachers meeting outside of teaching and learning time, outside of school hours. And they are essentially following a model similar to what we followed a few years ago with the new ELA curriculum implementation or review and implementation process. We have to work out some more of those details, but our estimate is that we would have essentially about 10 teachers, including teachers who are special education and ML certified, joining that team, as well as a range of K to 5 and 6 to 8 teachers are part of that team engaging in this work. And then the professional learning, again, this estimate is based on some of our historical data around paying teachers to participate in professional learning experiences that are specific to some of the math goals that we've highlighted today, but also specific to some of the department goals that Octavia has for her team. And then you want to jump to number 3?
Um, Wait, number 3, you said? Sorry.
Yes.
So thinking about the not doing the math 6 bypass moving forward, we need to do some a lot of intentional planning around what the next steps will be for that, and that will start this spring. I've initiated some conversation with the building leaders at Gibbs to think about like what are our next steps, and part of the next piece is to loop in staff, the math department staff, and talk about what do we want for students? What do we see? What have we seen in the past? And how do we support those students who are ready for something that's a little bit more accelerated or enrichment or moves deeper? Like all of these things can come up. What do we want to focus on and how do we want to do it? And so we need to do that planning, which will Dr. Ford Walker and I have already started talking about what time are we using to do that planning, carving that out. Like that's really the first step. When are we going to do that? What is it we're doing during the spring? And so it's really making that decision and doing a large portion of the planning and using the current summer planning to fine tune it and do some of the more detailed aspects of that planning. And then even thinking about that's going to continue because we'll do something different next year. We need to reflect on it and refine it. And that's going to require some additional time and resources to do that planning. And then in terms of data collection and an assessment platform, there's platforms available that can support assessing readiness for students to give us another data point. We have our MCAS data. Students are doing IXL and we have the diagnostic data. We have data from teachers. It would be nice to think about what other data can we collect kind of during the school year. Can we do some type of assessment collection the way that we do at the elementary schools? And then do we have another formal platform we might be able to use and get somewhat end of the year feedback that's not MCAS, and we can get those results much sooner than MCAS to support informed decisions for students moving ahead in their coursework.
Are these based on quotes?
Yeah.
What data collection assessment platform is only $1,500? I think that's like,
Yeah.
that's my inner dialogue. Sorry. I'm a little surprised at how low that is.
It's the, wait a minute. It's out of California. It's the mathematics
that one?
diagnostic. Yeah, it's the
Okay.
one that
That one
Newton
is inexpensive.
in
Okay.
Belmont. Yeah. It's quite,
Okay.
it's budget friendly.
Yeah, it is. All for
Okay.
anything that's budget friendly. Was the consultant say, you're gonna talk about that next, but
Yeah, we've been working with a consultant, sort of thinking about the planning for the task force. He is not located in Massachusetts, and so there's another consultant we've worked with that's been doing some professional development for the district PD sessions for Audison math teachers. And he has a much closer proximity, and so sort of thinking about how do we leverage the two consultants. They bring value, and I think in different ways, to support the work that we're doing. But it would be really nice to have someone who has close proximity, who's able to come in and actually do some face-to-face work with the teachers, participate in learning walks. Yeah.
I appreciate the budget consciousness on this. Dr. Ford Walker, are these costs that could be kind of moved over as we get used to EL education
Yes.
to support this? So it's not an add on to what's currently
Yes.
in the operating, okay.
And then finally, the work of the task force will continue throughout the remainder of this school year. As I mentioned before, we've had 3 out of 7 meetings so far. And the remainder of our meeting dates are here, January, February, March, and April. And we'll continue to work on the charge that's been given to the task force, continue to explore local and national research to help inform our decisions. As Octavia mentioned, meet with admin, but also staff from other districts as well to continue to learn about best practices in place locally. Gather feedback from APS staff, students, and families. There has been an explicit next step in terms of Octavia supporting the Gibbs team. We didn't mention this, but they will have early release days this spring to do some of this intentional planning so that we'll kind of rolling into the summer with the plan already outlined and just the need to maybe identify a few details here and there. But the goal is to have the plan for what is post-math bypass programming at Gibbs in the springtime. And that includes enrichment opportunities for students. And then finally, we will present to CIAA again and school committee, hopefully, in May of 2026 to share what the final recommendations are of the task force and any other additional recommendations on top of what we shared this afternoon. And that is it.
Thank you. Paul, I don't know if you're there or available. Do you have any questions?
Sure, I basically have a comment and forgive the double sign in on here. I've got a Wi-Fi connection spotty and I'm supplementing it with a phone connection off my phone, which is what I'm using right now. The one thing I was really impressed with, and I think that is important to note, is the relationship between algorithm-based versus conceptual instruction in mathematics. Because as a former 9th grade algebra teacher, I worked in a district where we had most of our students coming up through the system, but still a sizable percentage of students who were coming out of private schools that were more algorithm based. And you could really see when you were teaching the difference between the two sets of students and trying to teach them algebra. Because there are so many concepts that you don't really understand if you memorize the algorithm and start plugging things in, like multiplying by negative numbers, fractions with the negative denominator. That memorization really doesn't promote an understanding for it. I think this is a very thoughtful presentation. I think you're going in the right direction. I think you're hitting all the right research questions. For the sake of this meeting, I would move acceptance of this report.
I'll second that. Okay, we will vote on that. Mr. Schlickman?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So we will accept this presentation. Sorry, now I have to put that in the minutes. All right. Any other comments or anything? Paul?
No, this is just a report on progress, and I think we are making progress.
Great.
And I appreciate how thoughtful it is and the fact that the budget page really showed a responsible approach in the context of where we're at right now.
Okay. Thank you. I also appreciate all the detail and examples. I know you haven't gotten there yet, but I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is how co-taught classes or teachers with special ed classes with special educators might look. Have you talked about that yet? Can you just share a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really good question and something that has been at the front of what we've been thinking about. So both the special ed coordinator at Gibbs and the one at Audison, we are planning co-department time. So in one of the schools, it'll be this month and the other school will be next month. So starting to bring those teams together and align the conversation around what are some co-teaching strategies that can be used in the classroom, in a math classroom. It could look a little different in other content areas. What does it look like to support students struggling in math? Like, what does productive struggle look like versus like when do you intervene? And so thinking what are other co-teaching strategies? How do you do small group work? How do you do stations? And this is all like starting that conversation. So everything I just named is not necessarily, we would be able to unpack it all in one department time. But bringing those teams together to get that conversation started, and then maybe that could grow into pairs of teachers starting to continuing that. And the math coach, myself, and both special ed coordinators are willing to provide additional support as needed too for individual teams. Yeah.
And can that sort of structure exist within the staffing? And I don't know who this question really goes to, model that we have now. Do you need additional special education FTEs to?
No, if anything, this makes it easier to provide some services. Yeah, if there are fewer different pathways students are moving through, then it is easier for us to make sure we have inclusive and equitable, balanced classes in any one course. And we're not, I mean, I know we're going to talk about this at length on Thursday, but we're not, all of the positions they are talking about that are part of our current staffing model are not under consideration for reduction in the event of a failed override in 27.
And they don't require an addition of
No.
special ed.
Doesn't sound like there's an addition.
I think also by strengthening our tier 1 instruction and really thinking about how do we teach heterogeneously to a wide variety of students, I think that will also support all of our students, right? Not just our students with disabilities, our ML students.
And then I guess thinking along those sort of similar lines, with I think it was I don't know that you called it WIN at Gibbs, but sort of that's,
Yeah.
I know it's named in here as WIN, but
Well, I called it WIN, but I don't know. It might be getting
New name.
yeah.
And a reduced amount of time in the kids' schedules. I think they're looking at.
Yeah, I think that's why I think
Not
like some
everything.
of what we're doing is influenced a little bit by the structures available to us in the different buildings, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And so as that gets modified, like we can start to work, it's all these pieces working together
Okay.
to a lot of moving parts.
So again, like there are places in the schedule for students who need that support, who might not be on an IEP to get the support that they need to be able to.
The goal is to answer that question. Are we able to provide this? And if we're not, like, how do we do this? And I don't want to speak for it because it's multiple content areas that would access this.
There are like lots of trains running towards a similar destination,
Yeah.
which is good news, but all at the same time. And I do think that one of the things that the Gibbs team discovered, because they were listening to feedback about how WIN happened this year, and I think there's frustration around how that got structured, and it's understandable, and we've tried to mitigate as much of that as we can, but the those discussions surfaced when they talked about and looked at elimination of that entirely. That what that would do was deny access to a lot of opportunities and courses and things that kids wanted to do if they did have an IEP, if they did have additional services. And so it was going to sort of set us backwards if we totally eliminated it, but there's definitely agreement that it needs to be restructured. So within that restructuring that's happening now, this will need to dovetail. And so it's understandable that committee is still meeting and still working on recommendations, that they don't quite know what the structure is that would support this yet. But once they do, the planning should move quickly.
And then my last question is, and maybe it's a statement. So my understanding is the sixth grade bypass test is no longer. And so there will be something different for all sixth graders next year,
Correct.
for sure. Okay, so that's like some of these other things feel like there could be another, like, more time to explore next year, whereas like this is sort of a hard decision that's been made, and
Correct.
so there has to be something for sixth grade.
Correct. And we know that we've taken that task or charge moving forward. That's what we're focusing on. And so I started working with the building admin at Gibbs today to clarify, like, what is it we need? Like, what is the direction that we're going in? When are we going to do it? And then what is the what? And so that's part of the spring planning, to have that solidified to most completion before we enter the summer.
So Jen, just some housekeeping things now. Whoever this presentation belongs to, if they can make sure that Liz Diggins gets a copy PDF or whatever, just so she can put it into Novus, the public to see. And then in terms of the timeline, moving forward, Liz, do you feel like a recommendation in May to this subcommittee and then to the school committee? I'm wondering if we should have the subcommittee talk a little earlier, just so that if it feels like it's going in a direction that's not gonna.
I think at least a subcommittee meeting before May is a good idea. Or an update on the full committee.
I would be comfortable in March.
Yeah.
Presenting what the team is thinking. Because by that time we'll have two, I think we'll be ready to share by.
So I'm wondering, so sort
And
of
then we have a final meeting.
the turnover of the committee will be like the first week of April. So if we did something in the last week of, or at the end of March, after your March 2nd meeting, but before the end of March, it would just be this subcommittee, which has had sort of this conversation already before it does or doesn't get mixed up.
I guess my biggest question would be, do we want to do anything at regular committee in between now and May? Because I know this is a topic of interest, and Mr. Motti was asked to come back and talk about WIN. So
Yes.
when he presented, when the principals were here. So it might be worth, once there's an idea of what sixth grade would look like, to even just have a update to the full committee, even a short one, on what sixth grade will look like, since people know this is an adjustment. Fifth grade families won't get asked to take an assessment. And like what we're gonna do next year, and then when if there are things that are gonna be ongoing, we can name that during that same presentation. We don't have to have it all done yet, but I think there will be some interest in the spring about what the plan is for Gibbs in particular.
I mean, I guess I would, well, before March 28th, I'll let you talk to Mr. Thielman or after someone else. But yeah, I mean, maybe that makes sense. And then the subcommittee the full committee can decide if they want it to come back.
I agree. We should have some sort of a report out of progress in March.
To the full committee, Paul, or?
Even if it's just subcommittee, I mean, something on the record officially.
Okay. We can.
Yeah, I think we should.
Just
Oh.
all
All right. Anything? Can't see people's hand. Anything else on this from anyone? All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate you doing this on the second day back from vacation too. Realize there's a lot going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. We have a few more.
Do we?
Do you have a few minutes?
Yeah.
Just one more, I think, that
Oh.
you need to be here
Okay.
for. Okay, I'll go fast.
I hope I didn't need to be.
So the full committee had asked this subcommittee to discuss the superintendent's evaluation. I'm not like, I'm not
Today,
sure
okay.
if it's
all public.
to talk about the
Oh,
end, the form at the end, are
Yeah.
we supposed to come?
so, oh my gosh, I kind of remember this topic. So I think it was, how do we, now I remember, align the district's goals with my goals so that so they're not operating as like these two separate cycles, district goals and the,
Talk
is
about,
that, am I remembering right, Mr. Schlickman?
Partially, yes, that's one of the topics. I think that there was also a desire of the committee to look to streamline the process of the evaluation somewhat and to address the instrument. I mean, the thing is of doing an interim assessment to a more full assessment on a 2-year cycle. Having the odd year being a feedback loop. And the even year being a full formal evaluation. But I think we do also need to go and take a look at the instrument we're using. The other thing is that in looking at the evaluations, I think there was a lot of commonality between members, so that I don't think we have to worry in the immediate future about divergent viewpoints on the evaluation. I think that we all have a clear understanding of what the expectations are, the goals are, and how the goals relate to the evaluation process. So, which gives us the opportunity to be a little less stringent on the, say, odd year of the evaluation. So yeah, that's what we're looking at, streamlining the process, aligning all the different packages and goals, and also looking at the instrument.
So I don't have thoughts on the instrument.
Mhm.
That's up to you all, are the ones that use it. So, but I've been thinking a lot about the two different cycles on goals in my evaluation. The district develops the district goals in June for approval by the committee in June, shortly before we go on summer. And that necessitates a cycle in which we have principals building school quality plans as we enter in the fall with their ILTs. And it's a crush of things that are kind of due right away at the start of the year when they're trying to launch a school year productively. And I don't think that's super supportive of our schools, and it doesn't match the cycle on which I'm evaluated, and the district goals are mirrors of my own goals. And so we have these two cycles that are kind of 6 months off of one another. So what I would suggest is actually that we go ahead and build next year's district goals now. And that instead of bringing the committee my goals in January, that at the end of January, I bring you all the district's goals, that we approve those ahead of time so that or we come to CIAA at the end of January and look at them, and then we bring it to the full committee or something. But we do that during the winter so that in the spring, we can build our PD plan. The schools can draft their quality plans for next year. And they would probably more or less base them on what they just built for this year, update them with the work that they're already doing this year for next year. Have a quality plan walking into next school year, so they're not trying to write it as they're walking in with the kids. And then do the report outs on the quality plans towards the end of the year, closer to the cycle that I'm currently on. So that when
end of the calendar year.
yeah.
Yes.
So that we're doing all of that reporting out, we're doing those quality plans, the outcomes report, all on the prior school year at the same time in fall. And I think that makes a lot more sense, just in terms of the cycle that we're on. It's a different cycle than the school year cycle, but it makes sense given when we get data and when we've been approving my goals and doing my evaluation. So I've sort of come full circle. Initially, I thought we needed to mirror the school year when I came, and now I don't think so. I think we actually should move more things onto the evaluation cycle and do the goals for next year sooner so that our schools can plan ahead for the following year.
Does that impact like teacher evaluations? Because I know sometimes it's sort of been this rush to get the district goals ready at June so that teachers had something to build their goals on.
I think if anything, this gives us a lot more to tell the staff about what we're gonna plan on doing, what they can count on being supported with, what PD they can look forward to getting that will support their goals. Like anything, this gives us a lot more room to plan for the following year. And one of our challenges this past year was that we were building the PD plan, having not finalized the goals. Like when those are all happening at the same time, it's a lot of moving parts that impact each other. So it'd be easier if we had the goals earlier, like in February, March, because then we can plan through April, May.
I think
So
one of the
Go ahead.
okay, I think one of the challenges of doing that, and because we're a pretty stable district, and I think we're anticipating the trends, but one of the problems with the schedule is, you know, you'd be writing goals based on data from 2 years past, so that if we're taking a look at the MCAS scores and the results that we got in October, that's from the fiscal 25 school year. And to use 25 data to be planning goals for 27 makes me nervous. So I think the one mitigation is that what the impact and the results we're seeing are pretty consistent across time. So to be able to have some sort of a feedback loop or a way to assess and evaluate based on more current data as you're going along. I do understand the need to plan professional development over the summer and set goals for teachers based on the start of school in September. That's totally understandable. But we've got to find a way to allow surprises in the data to come in and allow us to be agile in terms of redirecting support and resources if something unusual or unexpected happens, either positively or negatively.
And that's why we've done the leadership workshop in August, right after outcomes come out, and then everybody is building their plan around that. So I think we would have them draft everything. We would come back in August, look at our data, spend those 2 days of institute time looking through what we see in the outcomes, revise the drafts, make adjustments to them before we finalize them for the year. But that gives a lot more room for some creative planning and tweaking in the fall as opposed to building out the plan for the year.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have embargo data that we're not allowed to see as you're doing the institute in the summer. So the test for me would be, when we get the new data presentation the end of September, beginning of October, does it align to the maneuvers that you've made based on your Summer Leadership Institute?
Right.
And that could be a goal, is to adjust the plans based on data over the summer.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for some sort of structural way to bring that in.
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like we should, because I think Len might have some thoughts on this too, so it feels like we should
Table it and come back.
come back to it.
Mhm.
But I'm almost wondering if it should be a part of coming with your next set of goals, or we want to have a conversation about if
I should probably come with the next set of goals, because I should probably draft, if we're gonna do it that way, draft some of those district goals for consideration. So why don't we do like goals and evaluation meeting?
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, so we will.
In January early.
So sometime before the February break. Okay. All right, because I know Len is away, so I will work on that with Stiggins and everybody. All right, the next thing, Paul, we need to just approve minutes from October 30th, 2025, and some June 2nd minutes that got lost in my drive.
Motion to approve the minutes as
And
presented.
I will second that. Roll call vote, Mr. Schlickman,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So those minutes have been approved. Future agenda items. All right, so we're gonna do the superintendent
Mhm.
and district goal before February. And then the other piece, we have been talking about a presentation on deeper learning. Can we do both of those in this hour chunked time that we have, or do you want to try to do two separate?
I don't know, that feels like a lot.
A lot.
In an hour.
Okay,
We
so
could do a longer meeting, but
okay, we'll see. Is
might be
this
two.
okay? We'll have to be in touch because I know
Yeah.
some people need to leave and I can't be here till 3:30. So
Right. Yeah, I would be fine with two meetings. We just have to
Okay.
have two separate ones.
all right. Anything else, Paul, in terms of future? Oh, and then sorry, and then we said another math pathways before March 28th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Some sort of an update, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Anything else?
No, I have nothing else. Would you like a motion to adjourn?
Good, thank you. All
Motion to adjourn at 4:41 PM.
right, and I will second that. Roll call vote, Mr. Schlickman,
Yes.
and I vote yes, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you both.
Thank you.